So I want you to think about a massive, multi-million-dollar suspension bridge.
Okay, like a really grand architectural marvel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like the steel cables are just gleaming in the sun. The concrete pillars are rooted deep down into the bedrock. The whole architecture is absolutely breathtaking.
Right, it looks invincible.
Yeah. And you drive up the ramp, and you're just marveling at the sheer ambition of it all. You know, the wind is in your hair, the horizon is opening up right in front of you.
Sounds like a great drive.
It is, until right over the deepest, most treacherous part of the gorge, the asphalt just stops.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, just midair. Nothing but a terrifying drop right into the river below.
So they just didn't finish it.
Right, like the builders ran out of money or materials, or maybe they just, didn't figure out how to anchor it on the other side before they started pouring concrete.
It is basically a monument to a half-baked idea.
Totally.
I mean, it's a beautiful, catastrophic plunge waiting to happen, all because the focus was entirely on the thrill of the start rather than, the actual mechanics of the finish.
And the really terrifying thing here is that we do this in our own lives all the time.
Oh, absolutely we do.
So I want you, the listener, to pause whatever you are doing right now and just think about a major project or a career pivot or even a relationship goal that you are pursuing right now. Like, really picture it in your mind's eye.
Get a clear image of it.
Right. And ask yourself, are you actually planning for the specific moment your tires hit the opposite shore? Like, the negotiations, the compromises, the inevitable fatigue you're going to feel.
The boring stuff.
Exactly, the boring, hard stuff. Or are you just, I don't know, daydreaming about how good you're going to look driving up that pristine on-ramp?
And that tension right there is exactly what we are dissecting today.
Yes, it is.
We are exploring this profound, yet honestly, often completely ignored rule of strategy. Specifically, we're looking at Law 29 from our source material today, which is simply plan all the way to the end.
It sounds so simple when you say it out loud.
It does, but the thesis we are unpacking is chillingly simple, yet incredibly difficult to execute in practice. Because, most of us are ruled by the heart, not the head.
Right, we're emotional creatures.
Exactly. We rely on improvisation, and while improvisation feels incredibly empowering, like, in the heat of the moment, it ultimately only gets us as far as the very next crisis.
It doesn't win the war.
No, it does not win the war.
So we have a massive, really fascinating stack of sources to go through today for this deep dive.
We really do. Some incredible stories in here.
Yeah, we are talking about sweeping historical case studies, some really deep philosophical interpretations, and even ancient fables that all circle around this ultimate strategic sin of just winging it through life.
Winging it is the perfect way to describe it.
Right. And our mission today is to pull apart the crucial difference between merely having a goal, which, let's be honest, is often just a wish dressed up in business attire, and actually planning to the absolute end.
And planning to the end includes anticipating the vultures, the hidden obstacles, and perhaps most unnervingly knowing exactly when to stop.
Yes, the stopping part is so hard.
It requires a fundamental shift in how we process ambition and really how we interact with our own desires. I mean, we are talking about rewiring the brain to look past the immediate dopamine hit of starting something new.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before we dive into the grand, sweeping historical epics, and we had some truly wild geopolitical sagas today, I want to start small.
Good idea. Ground it first.
Yeah, I want to ground this in a very simple ancient fable from Aesop. I think it perfectly encapsulates the danger of jumping in without looking down, and it kind of sets the psychological baseline for everything else we're going to talk about today.
Oh, the story of the two frogs.
Exactly. The two frogs.
It's a brilliant starting point. I mean, it was written in the 6th century BC, yet it maps so perfectly onto modern cognitive behavioral theory and decision-making.
It really does. So picture this. Two frogs live in a comfortable shallow pool of water. But it's the dead of summer, the heat is absolutely brutal, and their pool dries up completely. The mud cracks.
They're in crisis mode.
Totally desperate, baking in the sun. So they set out together across this scorched earth to find a new home. And eventually, after a grueling journey, they stumble upon a deep well.
A literal oasis.
Right. It's amply supplied with cool, fresh water. The first frog looks down the dark shaft and says, "This is perfect. Let's descend and make our home in this well. It'll give us shelter, it'll give us food, and we'll be safe from the sun."
Now, notice the psychology there. That first frog is reacting purely to immediate pain.
The heat.
Yes, the dried pool is the crisis, the agonizing heat is the present danger, and the water at the bottom of the well represents immediate, overwhelming relief.
So he just wants to jump.
Exactly. There is no calculation happening in the prefrontal cortex here. It is pure amygdala. It is a fundamental survival reflex.
But the second frog stops him. He looks down the shaft, he studies the sheer stone walls, and he replies with far greater caution.
He asks the million-dollar question.
He does. He asked a very simple question. But suppose the water should fail us? How can we get out again from so great a depth?
And that right there is a masterful breakdown of how human instinct actually works.
Because we are all that first frog sometimes.
Most of the time, honestly. The first frog represents our baseline evolutionary setting. We experience discomfort like maybe it's a dried up revenue stream at our company or a toxic living situation we just can't stand anymore.
Or a stagnant career that makes us feel invisible.
Exactly. So we leap at the absolute first apparent solution that presents itself. We see the water, we feel the heat on our backs, and we jump.
We don't even look at the walls.
No, we completely fail to calculate the exit strategy because our brains are chemically rewarding us just for escaping the immediate pain.
We just assume the well will always have water because, well, the water's there right now. We project the present into the future.
Precisely. We assume the favorable conditions of the present moment will extend indefinitely. There is a really powerful quote from the Prussian military theorist Karl von Clausewitz in our text that cuts right to the bone here.
Oh, I love this quote.
He wrote, "There are very few men, and they are the exceptions, who are able to think and feel beyond the present moment."
Think and feel.
Right. Note that he says think and feel, because it is one thing to logically, intellectually know the future is coming. It is a completely different thing to emotionally weigh the consequences of a remote danger as heavily as you feel a present one.
Think and feel beyond the present moment. That's heavy and honestly a bit indicting.
It exposes a lot of our flaws.
It does. But let me play devil's advocate for a second here, because I can hear people yelling at their audio players right now.
Go for it.
Isn't that first frog just being decisive? I mean, we live in a business culture that constantly preaches, move fast and break things.
Yeah.
We are told to be agile, to launch the minimum viable product, to trust our gut.
The Silicon Valley mantra?
Exactly. If you stand at the edge of the well, calculating every single variable, analyzing the rainfall probabilities for the next 10 years, don't you just die of thirst on the edge? Doesn't overplanning kill execution?
That is the standard defense of impulsivity, for sure. And it's why people so frequently mistake a bias for action for an actual strategy.
Right.
But we have to rigorously separate true agility from blind reactivity. Decisiveness without foresight isn't strategy at all. It is simply a gamble.
A roll of the dice.
Exactly. Agility implies you have a definitive direction, a known destination, and you are nimbly adjusting your path around obstacles to get there.
Like dodging rocks on a path.
Yes, but blind reactivity, which is what the first frog is doing, is jumping into a hole you physically cannot climb out of.
Because the environment dictates your fate at that point, not your skills.
Yes. If that well dries up, all the agility in the world won't save you. You are trapped by the physics of the stone walls. You haven't actually solved your overarching problem of finding a sustainable habitat. You have merely delayed your demise.
And crucially, you have removed all your future options.
That's the key. You traded a difficult situation that still had options, like continuing to hop across the desert, as awful as that is, for a comfortable situation with absolute zero options.
So the second frog isn't just a pessimist.
Not at all. The second frog isn't paralyzed by analysis paralysis. He isn't afraid of action. He is recognizing a fatal trap. He is feeling the remote danger of a dried well as intensely as he feels the present danger of the sun.
Wow. So for you listening right now, take a mental inventory of the deep wells in your own life.
It's a great exercise.
Think about that new job offer that pays incredibly well, but demands all your time and isolates you from your network. Or think about taking on a massive high-interest loan to launch a product just to get it to market faster.
Or moving across the country for a romantic relationship that's only a few months old.
Oh, that's a classic one. The entry's so incredibly easy, the water looks so cool. But if the macroeconomic situation changes, if the relationship sours, if the water fails, is the exit impossible? Have you engineered a situation where you physically or financially can't climb back out?
Because if you haven't planned the exit, you haven't planned at all. You have merely reacted.
Now, if we want to see what happens when a person operates entirely like that first frog, but we scale it up from a tiny fable to a grand life-or-death geopolitical epic, we have to look at one of the most incredible historical accounts in our sources.
Oh, this story is wild.
It really is. We are traveling back to the year 1510 to follow a Spanish stowaway who literally conquered the unknown, only to end up losing his own head.
The saga of Vasco Nunez de Balboa, if there was ever a masterclass in the intoxicating thrill and ultimate tragedy of the improviser, this is it.
It reads like a Hollywood script. Set the scene for everyone. A Spanish galleon sets out from the island of Hispaniola, heading for a settlement in what is now Venezuela.
A standard voyage for the time.
Right. They are miles out of port, in the middle of the deep ocean, when suddenly a large provision chest on the deck pops open, and out climbs a stowaway, just gasping for air.
And this is Balboa.
This is Balboa. He is a Spanish noble who came to the New World seeking his fortune in gold. But instead, he got himself massively into debt, made a lot of enemies, and literally hid in a barrel of supplies to escape his creditors.
He is the ultimate embodiment of the first frog.
Oh, completely.
His dried-up pool was his crushing debt and his creditors. His deep well was the provision chest. He jumped in to escape the immediate burning pain of his financial ruin without any concrete plan for what would happen when the ship's captain inevitably found him mid-ocean.
You didn't think about the walls of the well.
He traded one crisis for an arguably much worse one.
And the immediate consequences are dire. The ship's owner is this wealthy, powerful jurist named Inciso, and he is absolutely furious.
I mean, you would be.
Yeah, he didn't sign up to ferry fugitives. So Inciso orders that Balboa be marooned on the very first deserted island they come across.
Basically a death sentence.
Exactly. Balboa is facing certain death by starvation or exposure. But here is where his unique talent for improvisation really shines. Because before they find a suitable island to dump him on, Enciso gets word from passing sailors that the colony they were sailing to rescue has actually been abandoned due to hostile local uprisings.
So now the whole ship is in trouble.
The crew is in an absolute panic. They have nowhere to land, their supplies are dwindling, and the captain looks weak. Balboa seizes the moment. He steps up onto the deck and tells the sailors he's been to the region of Panama before, a place called Darien.
And he starts spinning tales.
He spins these wild, charismatic rumors of endless gold just waiting to be picked up off the ground.
He is brilliant in the moment. He weaponizes their greed to override their fear, and he weaponizes their fear to override their loyalty to Enciso.
The sailors get so whipped into a frenzy that they actually convince Enciso to spare Balboa's life and let him navigate them to Panama.
Unbelievable.
And he does it. They land and establish the settlement in Darien. But Balboa isn't done playing the angles.
Of course not.
Enciso, by right of his wealth and status, is named the first governor of the settlement. Balboa, however, quietly begins a political campaign among the men. He points out every mistake Enciso makes, he promises them more wealth under his own leadership, and he essentially organizes a bloodless mutiny.
Enciso fears for his life and is forced to flee back to Spain.
Look at the sheer momentum of his improvisation here.
It's staggering. In a matter of weeks, Balboa has improvised his way out of unpayable debt, talked his way out of being marooned on a rock, and maneuvered himself into the de facto governorship of a brand new colony.
It is a stunning display of tactical agility.
But with improvisation, the Spanish crown isn't just going to let a stowaway run a highly strategic colony.
No, they have rules.
Exactly. When news gets back to Spain, the king sends an official, royally appointed representative to be the new governor and restore order.
And when this official arrives in Darien, Balboa and his men refuse to let him disembark. They literally turn his ship away.
Which is incredibly brazen.
And tragically, on his return voyage to Spain, this official governor's ship sinks and he accidentally drowns.
A stroke of terrible luck for Balboa.
Terrible.
Right.
Because now, under the strict laws of the Spanish Empire, Balboa is held personally responsible. He is officially deemed a rebel, a usurper, and a murderer. He is a wanted outlaw.
This is the exact moment the improvisation hits a structural wall.
The music stops.
Yes. Balboa has survived entirely on audacity up to this point. He has been playing a purely reactive game. But now he faces a massive systemic problem that charisma simply cannot solve.
He can't talk his way out of a royal decree.
Right. He is obsessed with finding El Dorado, the mythical city of gold. But to lay claim to it, to actually build the wealth and power he dreams of, he needs the official backing and approval of the Spanish king. As an outlaw, he will never get it. The crown will just send an armada, seize whatever he finds, and execute him for treason.
He is completely boxed in. He needs a miracle. He needs to do something so incredibly monumental, so uniquely valuable for Spain, that the king is forced to grant him a full pardon.
And he finds an opportunity.
He does. While agonizing over this, local Panamanian indigenous leaders tell Balboa about a vast, undiscovered ocean on the other side of the Central American Isthmus.
The Pacific.
Right. And even more intoxicating, they tell him of a massive land of unimaginable gold further south along that coast, which we now understand was the Incan Empire in Peru.
The ultimate prize.
Balboa decides this is his miracle. He is going to cross the treacherous Panamanian jungle, become the first European to discover this new ocean, and then march on this golden empire. But the clock is ticking. He has to do it before the Spanish authorities show up in Darien to arrest him.
Now, we cannot overstate the sheer physical nightmare of this plan.
Over the Darien Gap.
Yes. The Darien Gap is still, to this day, one of the most inhospitable, impenetrable jungles on the entire planet. Even modern explorers struggle with it.
It's basically a green hell. So it's 1513, and Balboa sets out with just 190 soldiers. They are literally hacking their way through 90 miles of some of the harshest terrain on Earth with swords and machetes.
And wearing armor, no less.
Wearing heavy, rusting armor. They face torrential, blinding rain, blood-sucking insects that carry disease, rampant jungle fever, hostile encounters. By the time they are halfway across the isthmus, 130 of his men are dead or entirely incapacitated.
Only 60 left.
Only 60 exhausted, emaciated soldiers remain.
Yeah.
But through sheer force of will, they make it. From the peak of a mountain range, Balboa looks out and becomes the first European to lay eyes on the Pacific Ocean.
An incredible moment.
He marches down to the shore, wades waist-deep into the salt water in full steel armor, holding aloft the banner of Castile, and formally claims the entire ocean and all its shores for Spain.
It is an undeniably iconic moment of historical triumph. The local indigenous chiefs in the area are awed by the Spanish weapons and armor, and they bring Balboa tribute. Raw gold, jewels, and massive pearls.
That's everything he dreamed of?
And most importantly, they point south down the coast, confirming the rumors of the Incas. Balboa is standing right on the razor's edge of unimaginable wealth and historical immortality.
He has a massive logistical problem.
He always does.
He only has 60 sick, starving guys left. He cannot conquer a sprawling, fortified empire with a few dozen men who can barely stand up. So what does he do? He makes a fateful decision. He decides to turn around.
Which makes sense tactically.
Tactically, yes. He marches back through the jungle to Darien, and upon arriving, he packs all the gold, the jewels, and the pearls onto a ship and sends them directly to Spain as a token of goodwill. He attaches a letter begging the king for a pardon and requesting a massive army to help him return and conquer this new land.
And here is where we must dissect Balboa's ultimate strategic sin.
This is the turning point.
Our source text identifies this moment with pinpoint accuracy. He went partway, achieved a stunning tactical victory, but he left the door wide open for others. He did not plan to the end.
Because while Balboa was hacking through the jungle discovering oceans, the political wheels back in Spain were turning. The king had already dispatched a massive armada of a dozen ships, carrying hundreds of heavily armed men, led by a ruthless noble named Pedrarias.
And Pedrarias had very clear orders.
Explicit orders. Arrest Vasco Nunez de Balboa for murder and usurpation. Now, by the time Pedrarias actually arrives in Panama, news of Balboa's miraculous discovery of the Pacific has finally reached Spain. The king is thrilled with the gold, grants the pardon, and sends a fast ship with new orders.
Which creates a mess.
A huge mess. The new orders say Pedrarias and Balboa are to share the governorship of the region.
Which is a remarkably unstable, toxic arrangement.
Completely.
Pedrarias is described in the historical accounts as a jealous, bitter, and deeply paranoid man. He arrives to find that he has the royal army, but Balboa has the love of the men, the knowledge of the terrain, and the glory of the discovery.
Balboa immediately senses this tension. He knows Pedrarias is a mortal threat to his dream of conquering the Incas. So Balboa, leaning once again on his talent for audacious improvisation, proposes a second, even more insane march across the jungle.
It's just crazy.
It is. This time, they won't just walk. They will carry massive shipbuilding materials, raw timber, heavy iron anchors, rigging, tools, all the way to the Pacific coast, build a fleet of ships there, and sail south to conquer Peru.
And astonishingly, Pedrarias looks at this plan and agrees to it. He gives Balboa the men to do it.
Why would he do that?
He agrees because he's a calculating political operator and he likely knows it is a suicide mission. He is letting the jungle do his dirty work.
Let the elements kill his rival.
Exactly. And it nearly does. Hundreds of men die in this second crossing. The massive timber beams they carry rot in the torrential rains, becoming just dead weight. They are attacked by indigenous tribes.
It's a disaster.
When they finally reach the Pacific coast, months later, the surviving men are completely broken. They manage to scrape together a few flimsy ships, but they are far too weak to mount an invasion of an empire.
So Balboa is forced once again to return to Darien empty-handed.
His luck finally runs out.
He limps back into town, and almost immediately, Pedrarias sends a messenger inviting Balboa to the outskirts of the settlement to discuss a new plan.
Sounds ominous.
Balboa, ever the optimist, rides out to meet him. But when he arrives at the rendezvous point, he isn't met by Pedrarias. He is met by a heavily armed detachment of soldiers led by his old friend, Francisco Pizarro.
The ultimate betrayal.
Yeah, a man who had marched shoulder to shoulder with him on that very first glorious crossing to the Pacific. But loyalty means nothing now. It's a trap. Pizarro arrests his old commander.
And Pedrarias doesn't waste any time.
No, Pedrarias convenes a kangaroo court, tries Balboa on entirely fabricated charges of rebellion and treason, and a few days later, Balboa is marched into the public square and beheaded.
The tragedy is absolute, but the bitterest irony of all, the ultimate historical punchline.
It gets worse.
Years later, it is that same Francisco Pizarro who takes the army, utilizes the exact routes Balboa mapped, sails south, conquers Peru, and claims the endless mountains of gold of the Incan Empire. Balboa's incredible physical deeds fade into the background, becoming nothing more than a footnote, a stepping stone to someone else's ultimate triumph.
Okay, here's where we really need to pause and process this.
Oh.
Because looking at Balboa is like watching a brilliant jazz musician trying to conduct a classical symphony.
That's a great way to put it.
In the moment, playing off the cuff, reacting to the energy in the room, he is an absolute genius. He can riff beautifully, he talks his way out of a barrel, he overthrows a governor with words, he survives the Darien Gap through sheer blinding charisma and bravado.
But he has no sheet music for the finale.
Exactly. He has no overarching structure. He knows how to play the notes, but he doesn't know how the song ends.
And that analogy works because improvisation is neurologically intoxicating. It floods the brain with adrenaline and dopamine. It makes you feel invincible because you keep narrowly escaping disaster by the skin of your teeth.
You feel like destiny is on your side.
You really do. But mathematically, over a long enough timeline, relying purely on improvisation is a doomed strategy. You cannot roll the dice forever and expect to hit sevens. Eventually, the house wins.
Balboa's fatal error was that he mistook his talent for surviving the immediate crisis for a strategy to win the ultimate prize.
Yes.
I kept reading this account and thinking, man, Balboa was just a victim of really bad timing. If he hadn't gone back into the jungle the second time, or if the king's pardon had arrived a month earlier, he might have survived. But the source material is much harsher on him than that, isn't it?
Much harsher.
It implies his entire strategic framework was fundamentally flawed from the moment he saw the ocean. What does the text argue he should have done? If we take away the romance of the explorer, what is the cold, calculated move?
The text is indeed brutal in its assessment because strategy does not care about romance. It states clearly that a true person of power, a real strategist, would have foreseen the rivals and the vultures. The moment you whisper the word gold in the 16th century, or frankly in any century, the vultures immediately start circling. Balboa's core mistake was sending the treasure to Spain before he had secured the source.
He gave up his secret.
He should have kept his knowledge of the Pacific and the Incas an absolute, heavily guarded secret until he had covertly built the means to conquer Peru himself.
But he sent the gold.
Yeah.
He basically printed out glossy flyers, handed them to the king, and said, hey, look at all this treasure I found. Please send heavily armed men to my exact location to come take it from me.
It was incredibly naive.
He gave away all his leverage for a pat on the back.
Exactly. He sought external validation over strategic security. He wanted the king to love him more than he wanted to secure the empire. Furthermore, the text suggests a deeply ruthless alternative regarding Pedrarias.
Oh, this part is intense.
Once Pedrarias arrived with the royal army, a truly prudent strategist would have recognized the existential threat instantly. Balboa shouldn't have gone back into the jungle to carry rotting wood. He should have stayed in Darien and spent his time scheming to politically isolate, imprison, or even assassinate Pedrarias to seize control of that royal army.
Wow. That is dark. So it's a level of ruthless prudence. It's looking at the political board and saying, this man wants my gold in my head. We cannot coexist. I must strike first.
Strategy at the highest levels requires you to deal with the reality of human nature, not the idealized version where everyone plays fair and shares the glory.
Right.
Balboa was locked in the present moment, reacting emotionally to the joy of his pardon, reacting submissively to Pedrarias' arrival, never thinking 3 steps ahead to the inevitable betrayal. He assumed the happy ending was guaranteed just because he had worked hard.
Balboa was a brilliant tactician, but a terrible strategist. But that begs a huge, uncomfortable question. Why are we so prone to this?
It's human universal.
Why do intelligent people consistently mistake our vague, rosy dreams like, I'm going to find El Dorado, or I'm going to start a disruptive tech company and retire at 40, for actual, concrete, stress-tested plans? Our sources point to a fatal psychological flaw that bridges all eras, something we can call the happy ending delusion.
And to truly understand the root of this delusion, we need to look at how the ancient Greeks viewed the world and the human mind.
I love this framing.
In their cosmology, they drew a sharp, unbridgeable distinction between the gods and humanity. The gods were believed to have complete, unobstructed vision into the future. They saw everything to come, right down to the most intricate, mundane details. They saw the end of every story before the first page was written.
They didn't just know how the movie ended, they saw the end credits.
Precisely. Mortals, on the other hand, were seen as victims of fate. We are trapped in the prison of the present moment, constantly blinded by our immediate emotional states: fear, lust, greed, pride, anger.
Just reacting to what's in front of us.
Exactly. We cannot see beyond the immediate dangers or the immediate pleasures right in front of our faces. This philosophical framework is exactly why, in Greek mythology, heroes like Odysseus are so deeply revered.
Because he plans ahead.
Right. Odysseus wasn't just physically strong. His defining trait was cunning. He planned several steps ahead. He anticipated traps. By calculating the end, he defied fate and approximated the power of the gods.
That makes sense. But the terrifying reality is that most of us aren't Odysseus. When we make big decisions, we are much more like the Athenians in 415 BC.
Yes, the disastrous Sicilian expedition.
It's such a wild story.
If you want a perfect historical manifestation of the happy ending delusion on a massive societal scale, this is it. Let's provide some context for the listener.
Set the stage.
Athens is locked in the Peloponnesian War. For those who need a quick refresher, this was essentially a grinding, brutal, decades-long superpower struggle between Athens and Sparta for dominance over the Greek world.
Like a Cold War that turned very hot.
Exactly. It has been going on for 16 years. The population is exhausted, the treasury is bleeding, and everyone is desperate for a decisive victory to just end the pain. In the midst of this exhaustion, the Athenian assembly decides to launch a massive, incredibly expensive armada to attack the island of Sicily.
Wait, why Sicily? If they are fighting Sparta, which is right next door in mainland Greece, why send their entire navy to an island hundreds of miles away in the central Mediterranean?
Because they were seduced by a narrative.
A sales pitch.
Prominent politicians, particularly a highly charismatic, ambitious leader named Alcibiades, stood before the assembly and painted a picture of endless riches. They argued that conquering Sicily would bring massive wealth, intimidate Sparta into surrendering, and provide a glorious, decisive ending to a grinding 16-year war.
They were entirely seduced by the vision of the ticker tape parade. They felt the pain of the ongoing war, and Sicily was the well with the cool water.
They fell in love with the mood board of victory, but they completely ignored the reality of what it takes to actually pull off an amphibious invasion of that scale.
The logistics must have been a nightmare.
Our sources note they didn't seriously debate the logistics of supplying an army so far from home. They didn't foresee that the Sicilians wouldn't just roll over, but would fight with the ferocious desperation of people defending their own homes.
They assumed it would be easy.
And crucially, they suffered from massive confirmation bias. They didn't anticipate that all of Athens' other enemies across the region would see this massive overextension, realize Athens was vulnerable, and band together to support Sicily, forcing Athens into an unwinnable multi-front war.
It's the ultimate sunk cost fallacy mixed with pure hubris. They saw only the chance of glory, not the complex, interlocking dangers looming in the distance.
They only saw the happy ending.
And the result. The expedition was a catastrophic, unmitigated failure. They lost their fleet, their army was slaughtered or sold into slavery, and it led directly to the total destruction of the Athenian Empire. One of the greatest cultural and military powers in human history was annihilated because they were led by the emotional desires of their hearts, not the cold calculation of their minds.
It's a sobering lesson.
It really is. Now, you might look at the Athenians and think, well, that's the madness of crowds. That's what happens when a mob gets riled up by a charismatic speaker. A single calculating political operator wouldn't make that mistake.
But they do.
Exactly. The sources show us that this delusion scales down to individual masterminds, too. Which brings us to France in 1848, and a politician named Louis-Adolphe Thiers.
This is a phenomenal pivot because Thiers believed himself to be the ultimate rational strategist.
He thought he was the smartest guy in the room. Thiers is a man of order. He's a leading conservative figure, and France is in the midst of massive political upheaval. They are holding a high-stakes presidential election, and Thiers' faction is losing ground to a radical socialist rabble-rouser. Thiers is desperate to maintain control of the country.
He needs a candidate he can control to win the election for his party.
Right. He is looking for a puppet, someone with a recognizable brand but no actual political teeth. And his eye falls on a low-level, seemingly insignificant deputy in Parliament named Louis Bonaparte.
The grandnephew of the great Napoleon Bonaparte.
Exactly. Thiers looks at this guy and thinks, this is perfect. I found my golden ticket. This guy is widely considered a bit of an imbecile. He has no real political skill, no strong alliances, no sharp intellect. But that last name, Bonaparte, that name carries magic.
A very powerful brand in France.
That name alone will get him elected by a rural country that is desperate for a return to the strong leadership of the past. So Thiers plans it out. We'll get him elected. I'll pull his strings behind the scenes, use his popularity to crush the radicals, and when his term is up, we'll push him off the stage and take direct control.
It is the first frog all over again, just dressed in a 19th century tailcoat.
Yes.
Thiers found a well with water to solve his immediate election crisis. And the first act of the plan worked absolutely flawlessly. The Bonaparte name worked its magic, and Louis Bonaparte was elected president by a massive, overwhelming margin. Thiers thought he was an absolute genius.
But Thiers didn't plan to the end. He didn't ask the crucial question. What actually happens when you give an imbecile the keys to the kingdom, control of the military, and the mandate of the people?
Because the imbecile wasn't an imbecile at all. He was simply quiet and observant.
He was playing them.
Thiers failed to foresee one simple, foundational fact of human nature. Louis Bonaparte was a man of enormous, consuming, dynastic ambition. Once he had his hands on the levers of executive power, he wasn't about to politely give them up just because Thiers asked nicely.
I mean, why would he?
Bonaparte methodically placed his own loyalists in key military and police positions. And just 3 years later, before his term could end, Bonaparte executed a coup d'etat. He dissolved the parliament entirely, arrested his political opponents, declared himself Emperor Napoleon III, and ruled France as an absolute dictator for the next 18 years.
Incredible.
Thiers and his entire political party were left completely horrified and entirely powerless.
They literally handed the gun to the hostage. So what does this all mean for the mechanics of strategy? Our text brings in a brilliant quote from a 17th century French clergyman, Cardinal de Retz, who spent his entire life studying human schemes, court intrigues, and rebellions.
He had a front-row seat to power.
He observed all of this and wrote, "The most ordinary cause of people's mistakes is their being too much frightened at the present danger, and not enough so at that which is remote."
That sentence is the absolute synthesis of everything we've discussed so far. Thiers was terrified of the immediate danger, losing the election to the radical left. He was so intensely focused on solving that present fear that he completely ignored the massive structural remote danger.
Handing the supreme executive power of France to a man with an imperial bloodline, a famous name, and unchecked ambition.
Exactly.
You know, earlier I was thinking about how people plan their goals, and I came up with an analogy. But honestly, hearing the Thiers story makes me want to refine it.
Let's hear it.
Originally, I thought poor planning was like writing a movie script where you only write the action-packed opening and the glorious finale, but leave the middle blank. But that's not what Thiers did. He didn't leave the middle blank. He actively wrote it. His failure was a miscalculation of character.
Right.
It's like writing a script where you cast a real-life apex predator, a literal tiger, to play the hero's loyal golden retriever. You write all these scenes where the tiger fetches the paper and sits by the fire. You don't leave the page blank. You just arrogantly ignore the fundamental biological nature of the asset you're using. You just assume it won't bite anyone on set because the script says it won't.
That is a much sharper, much more accurate analogy. Thiers looked at a Bonaparte and assumed he would act like a docile bureaucrat. We delude ourselves by the sheer strength of our desire for our plans to work.
We want it so badly.
We project our wishes onto the world and expect reality to comply. True planning requires you to look at the actors, the assets, and the environment with cold, unsparing realism. It requires you to populate that second act of your script with all the grueling, boring, difficult, and dangerous contingencies. What if the star gets sick? What if the tiger gets hungry?
So I want to ask you, the listener, right now. Audit your own plans. That business you want to start with your best friend, that new market you want your company to expand into.
Put it under the microscope.
Are you actually planning for the vultures circling overhead? Have you mapped out in uncomfortable detail what happens when your business partner fundamentally disagrees with you on a major ethical issue? Or when the market dips by 20%, what is the legal structure for dissolving the partnership? Or are you just staring at the mood board, daydreaming about the prize money and the ribbon-cutting ceremony?
It is the stark difference between a wish and a strategy. A wish relies on everyone else behaving perfectly. A strategy anticipates that they won't.
Which perfectly bridges us to our next massive shift. We spent a lot of time looking at failure today. Balboa, the Athenians, and tears are all examples of being blinded by the heart, by emotion, by the desperation to solve a present danger.
The cautionary tales.
Right. But what does it look like when a human being operates differently? What does it look like when someone wields the cold, godlike foresight of the head? To answer that, we turn to a man known to history as the Iron Chancellor.
Otto von Bismarck. His orchestration of the unification of Germany between 1863 and 1871 is arguably the greatest, most flawless execution of Law 29 in modern geopolitical history.
Let's set the board, because the context here is everything. It's 1863. Europe is a fragile, incredibly complex powder keg. The major power players are England, France, Russia, and Austria. Prussia, which Bismarck serves as premier, is a strong state, but it's just one of several dozen states in a loosely allied, deeply fragmented German federation.
It's a very messy map.
And Austria is the undisputed big dog of this federation. The Austrians actively, aggressively work to keep Prussia and the other German states weak, divided, and submissive to Vienna.
Now, Bismarck looks at this incredibly complex, volatile board, and he does something very rare. He establishes one single, concrete, immutable goal.
Just one.
He does not want a sprawling, unmanageable global empire that stretches to Africa or Asia. He wants one thing, to form an independent, unified German state led by Prussia. Every single action he takes over the next 8 years is reverse engineered from that highly specific end state.
Okay, move one. Bismarck starts a war with lowly Denmark over some disputed northern territories called Schleswig and Holstein. Now, he knows that if the Prussian army just marches in and aggressively attacks Denmark, the other superpowers like France and England will get very nervous about Prussian expansionism and might intervene.
They'd form a coalition against him.
Exactly. So what does he do? He pulls a masterful psychological trick. He invites Austria to join him in the invasion. He tells them, we are recovering these traditional lands together, hand in hand, for the glory and benefit of the whole German Federation.
He is setting a trap using the spoils of war as bait.
So clever.
The war is quick. The combined Prussian and Austrian forces easily defeat Denmark. But then, during the peace negotiations, Bismarck suddenly shifts his stance. He makes a hardline demand. The newly conquered lands must become officially part of Prussia, not the Federation.
The bait and switch.
The Austrians, predictably, are absolutely furious. They fought the war, they spent the blood and treasure, but Prussia wants to keep the spoils. Tensions rise to a boiling point. They eventually compromise, awkwardly splitting the administration of the territories, but the structural damage is done.
The relationship is broken.
Bismarck hasn't just gained strategic land, he has intentionally engineered a situation that makes Austria look weak, reactive, and pliable on the world stage, while Prussia looks assertive and ascendant.
It was a setup from day one. He used them to legitimize the war, and then humiliated them in the peace.
Which leads directly to move 2. What I think is the masterstroke of his career. It's 1866. Bismarck convinces King William of Prussia to do the unthinkable, officially withdraw from the German Federation entirely and declare war on Austria itself.
A huge gamble.
Everyone in Prussia is against this. The king's wife, the crown prince, the generals, the other German princes, they all think it's absolute suicide to attack the big dog.
But Bismarck forces the conflict because he has spent years secretly modernizing the Prussian military. He knows their logistics, their rapid-fire rifles, and their railway transport are vastly superior to Austria's outdated tactics.
He knew he had the edge.
And his foresight is proven correct. In what becomes known as the 7 Weeks' War, the Prussian military machine violently and decisively crushes the Austrian army.
And here is where Bismarck separates himself from almost every other conqueror in human history. Prussia has won. The mighty Austrian army is broken and retreating. The Prussian king and his top generals are practically foaming at the mouth. They want the ultimate prize.
They're riding a massive high. They want to march their victorious troops right into the capital city of Vienna, hold a parade, and annex massive chunks of the Austrian Empire. They want blood, they want revenge for decades of submission, and they want ultimate glory.
And Bismarck physically throws himself in front of the war machine to stop them.
Literally.
He threatens to resign his post, he begs the king in tears, he locks himself in a room, he absolutely categorically refuses to let the army march on Vienna or take a single inch of Austrian land.
But why? I mean, put yourself in their shoes. Isn't it almost inhuman to stop in that moment? When you're on a winning streak, when your enemies are fleeing before you, every cultural instinct we have is screaming at you to keep betting, to press your advantage, to take everything you can. Why on earth would you stop?
To understand why he stopped, we have to look at the biology of power.
Okay, let's get into the science.
There is a well-documented neurobiological phenomenon called the winner effect. When an animal or a human wins a contest or a battle, their brain is flooded with testosterone and dopamine. This chemical surge literally alters the brain's risk assessment centers.
It makes you feel bulletproof.
It makes the winner feel invincible, lowering their perception of risk and making them highly likely to take bigger, more aggressive gambles in the next conflict. It is an evolutionary mechanism designed to secure dominance, but in geopolitics, it is a fatal flaw.
Because it makes you blind to the cliff edge.
Exactly. Bismarck's genius was that his rational mind overrode his biological winner effect. Remember his carefully defined end state, an independent Germany led by Prussia. If he marches on Vienna, what happens?
He gets Vienna.
Yes, but he humiliates Austria permanently, ensuring they will be a bitter, vengeful enemy on his southern border forever. They will spend the next century plotting his downfall. Furthermore, annexing massive amounts of Austrian territory would destabilize the delicate balance of power in Europe, absolutely guaranteeing that France or Russia would intervene militarily to crush a suddenly oversized Prussia.
By stopping the army, he prevents the coalition against him.
Yes. By stopping the army, Bismarck pivots instantly from the terrifying aggressor to the magnanimous peacemaker. He concludes a remarkably lenient treaty. He asks for no Austrian land, no vindictive reparations. All he demands is that Prussia and the other northern German states be granted total political autonomy.
He just wants to be left alone to build his state.
He gets exactly what he needs to form the North German Confederation, and he cleanly removes Austria from the German equation without creating a permanent existential blood feud.
It is a stunning display of self-control. He rejects the massive, intoxicating dopamine hit of total conquest in order to secure the boring structural safety of his long-term plan.
That takes incredible discipline.
Well, he's not done. Move 3. He has the North, but he needs to unite the independent southern German kingdoms with his new Northern Confederation to complete the puzzle. What unites disparate people better than a common, terrifying enemy?
Nothing unites like a shared enemy.
In 1870, Bismarck plays a brilliant, subtle cat-and-mouse diplomatic game. Through edited telegrams and calculated insults, he intentionally baits the French Emperor Napoleon III. Yes, the very same ambitious dictator that Thiers foolishly put into power, into declaring war on Prussia.
And it works perfectly. France appears to be the unprovoked aggressor. Out of fear and necessity, the southern German kingdoms immediately ally with Prussia.
The trap is sprung.
And once again, the highly modernized Prussian military machine systematically dismantles and destroys the French army in a matter of months. Napoleon III is actually captured on the battlefield.
Now, imagine being a leader in England or Russia at this moment. All of Europe is terrified. They look at Bismarck and they see a monster, a completely unstoppable force. They compare him to Attila the Hun. They assume he is going to march across the continent and try to conquer the world.
And honestly, why wouldn't they think that?
He just violently crushed Denmark, Austria, and France. 3 major powers in less than a decade. In 1871, in the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, he officially founds the German Empire. The Prussian king becomes the emperor. Bismarck becomes a prince. And then
he completely abruptly stops.
He just powers down the war machine.
For the rest of his long political life, Bismarck instigates absolutely no more wars. During this era, England, France, and Belgium are scrambling to conquer vast colonial empires all over Africa and Asia. They are grabbing land wherever they can.
The scramble for Africa.
Right. But Bismarck severely limits Germany's colonial acquisitions. The rest of the world thought he had just grown old, tired, and mellowed out. But they completely misunderstood him. This was the final, pre-planned move of his original design.
The end of the script.
He never wanted a sprawling, unmanageable global empire that would require endless wars to maintain. He wanted a secure, geographically contiguous, unified Germany. The moment he achieved that specific end state, he locked it in. He spent his remaining years weaving a complex web of defensive alliances just to maintain peace in Europe and protect his creation.
The source text calls this kind of self-control godlike. And looking at the wreckage of history, I completely see why. To be the single most powerful man in Europe, to have an invincible army at your beck and call, and to have the psychological fortitude to say, no, we have enough, the project is finished.
It's almost alien.
Bismarck didn't just plan how to start his wars. He meticulously planned exactly how and when they would end. He refused to let the euphoria of success blur the ink on his original blueprint.
He acted contrary to the very nature of power itself. Power, by its nature, always seeks to expand its reach until it overextends and destroys itself. By keeping his eyes immovably fixed on the ending, Bismarck tolerated no deviation from the plan, not even from the desires of his own king.
Okay, Bismarck's execution was flawless. But if I'm being totally honest, sitting here in the 21st century, it feels deeply daunting.
It is intimidating.
How do we, mere mortals managing our careers and families, practically apply this godlike level of foresight without becoming totally paralyzed by anxiety? We can't all be chess grandmasters mapping out a decade of variables. If I try to plan 10 years ahead, I'll never leave my house.
It is a very valid concern. Planning to the end can easily devolve into neurotic overplanning, where you try to control external variables that are fundamentally uncontrollable.
Which just causes more stress.
Exactly. To understand how to implement this law practically without paralyzing yourself, our sources provide two final pieces of wisdom: a beautiful Sufi tale regarding systems, and a crucial analogy from the French philosopher Montaigne regarding energy.
Let's start with the Sufi tale. It's about a wealthy king and a wandering holy man, a Sufi mystic known as an Abdal. The king is out walking through the city with his entourage of nobles, and this Abdal cries out from the dusty roadside, "Whoever will give me 100 dinars, I will give him a piece of great advice."
100 dinars is a lot of money.
A fortune. The king is intrigued by the audacity. He pays the exorbitant sum of 100 dinars, expecting to hear some profound cosmic secret or a prophecy of wealth.
And the Abdal simply looks at him and says, "Never begin anything until you have reflected what will be the end of it."
The nobles immediately burst out laughing.
Right.
They mock the king, thinking he just got scammed out of a fortune for a basic fortune cookie cliché.
It does sound a bit cliché.
It does. But the king is smart. He realizes that while everyone knows this advice intellectually, absolutely nobody actually practices it in the heat of the moment. We are daily guilty of forgetting it. So the king does something highly practical. He commands that this phrase be written in gold on the walls of his palace, and he even has it permanently engraved onto the rim of his personal silver plate.
Notice what he is doing here. He is not relying on his own flawed emotional memory to recall the advice. He embeds the philosophy into his physical environment. He builds a system that makes his ultimate strategic principle visually unavoidable.
And it literally saves his life. Not long after, a faction in the court plots to assassinate the king. The plotters bribe the royal surgeon, promising to make him the prime minister if he uses a poisoned lancet on the king during a routine medical bloodletting.
High stakes.
The day arrives. The surgeon is sweating, nervous. A silver basin is placed under the king's arm to catch the blood. And right there, staring up at him from the rim of the basin, the surgeon reads the engraving. Never begin anything until you have reflected what will be the end of it.
The words act as a cognitive interrupt. They break through his immediate, blinding greed for the prime minister role. He stops looking at the promise of power, and he forcefully reflects on the end of the action.
The reality of the situation hits him.
He realizes, with sudden clarity, that if the plotter actually becomes king, the very first thing that plotter will do is execute the surgeon to silence the only living witness to the assassination. The surgeon suddenly sees the vulture circling his own carcass.
Terrified by the reality of the endgame, he drops the poison lancet and confesses everything. The king's foresight, literally stamped onto his silverware, thwarts the plot.
This tale isn't just a story about a lucky break. It is a manual on how you operationalize Law 29 in your daily life. You cannot rely on willpower alone to remember to think long-term when the pressure is on.
Because willpower fades.
It does. You have to build systems, routines, and environmental cues that violently force you to confront the end result of your actions before you take them.
Which brings us to the energy management side of planning, perfectly captured by Montaigne's warning. Montaigne uses the analogy of a reed growing in a marsh. He says we shouldn't act like the reed that shoots up vigorously, growing incredibly fast and tall right out of the dirt, but then quickly exhausts its nutrients and forms dense, brittle knots, losing all its original drive and upward momentum.
It burns out.
Instead, we must begin our endeavors gently and coolly, intentionally saving our breath and our vigorous thrusts for finishing the job.
It is a stunningly accurate metaphor for the modern epidemic of burnout. How many times have we seen a friend launch a new startup or start a radical new fitness regimen with manic, explosive energy?
Oh, all the time. January 1st at the gym.
They are working 18-hour days, they are posting about the grind constantly, they shoot up like the reed. But because they haven't paced themselves, because they haven't rationally planned for the grueling middle and the difficult end, they hit the very first major obstacle, they form a knot, and they break.
They sprint the first mile of a marathon, wave to the crowd, and then collapse in a ditch.
Exactly. Montaigne reminds us that in the beginning of a project, we control our affairs. We set the pace. But once things are set in motion, the momentum of the situation sweeps us along. If you haven't aggressively hoarded your energy, your capital, and your patience for the finish line, the circumstances will dictate your ending, not you.
But here is where we need to introduce the reversal of the law from our text, because this is where the practical nuance really lives. Planning all the way to the end does not mean being rigidly locked into one single inflexible path that can never change.
This is a critical distinction. A rigid plan is brittle. It snaps under the pressure of reality. If your grand plan demands that the universe, your competitors, and the macroeconomy behave exactly as you predicted on day one, you will fail.
Because things always change.
Sudden shifts of fortune, a global pandemic, a sudden change in interest rates, these things happen.
I always think of it as the difference between a train and a high-end off-road vehicle. A train has a hyper-rigid path. It is locked to the steel rails. If a bridge is out or a tree falls on the tracks, the train stops or it crashes. The plan is ruined.
It has no flexibility.
Right. An off-road vehicle, however, operates differently. It has a specific destination programmed into the GPS. It knows the end state. But if the main road is blocked by a landslide, the driver can shift into four-wheel drive, go through the mud, go over the hill, or find a detour. The route is highly adaptable, but the destination never changes.
That is a brilliant encapsulation of the reversal. True foresight means accepting, on a fundamental level, that the future is inherently uncertain. And ironically, that is exactly why you need a far-reaching plan.
To give you options.
If you are clear-thinking enough to anticipate disruptions, your plan will naturally include alternatives and buffers. It gives you the freedom to adapt in the moment without losing sight of the end goal. The danger this law warns against isn't adapting to changing circumstances. The danger is vagueness.
Just giving up and winging it.
Yes. It is the human tendency to abandon the goal entirely and just revert to pure improvisation when things get hard. Most people lose far less from overplanning than they do from vague, reactive maneuvering.
So let's make this highly actionable, a practical takeaway for you listening right now. Before you take that big leap, force yourself to do a pre-mortem. Don't just visualize success. Imagine it's 3 years from now and your plan has completely, utterly failed.
That's a great exercise.
Work backward. Ask yourself the hard, uncomfortable questions. What killed it? Did taking this promotion stir up resentment among my peers that sabotaged my leadership? If I build this software feature, will a larger tech giant just copy it and crush my market share? Ask these brutal questions when you are cool, calm, and collected long before the dopamine hits.
Because the cold statistical reality is that unhappy endings are much more common than happy ones. Do not be swayed by the cinematic, triumphant, happy ending playing on loop in your mind. Assume friction.
We have covered immense conceptual ground today. We started with the purely impulsive, reactive leap of the frog in the dried-up pool, jumping into a well he couldn't escape because he only felt the present heat.
And Balboa.
Yeah, we watched Vasco Nunez de Balboa survive the impossible through sheer improvisation, hacking his way across a jungle to discover an ocean, only to lose his head because he didn't plan for the political vultures.
Then the Athenians.
We dissected how the brilliant Athenians and calculating tears fell victim to the exact same delusion of the happy ending, blinded by their own desperate desires for a quick fix. And we contrasted all of that chaos with the chilling, masterful restraint of Otto von Bismarck, who built an empire precisely because he had the biological discipline to know exactly when to stop.
And the overarching why behind all of this is profound. We live in an economic and social ecosystem explicitly designed to reward instant gratification and reactive emotions. Social media algorithms, the 24-hour news cycle, the pressure of quarterly earnings reports, every system around us pushes us to be the first frog.
Let's just jump to the next thing.
But those rare individuals who can cultivate the deep discipline to step back, to ignore the immediate noise, and calmly reverse engineer their actions from a specific endpoint, those individuals hold a quiet, almost godlike power over their own destiny. They are no longer victims of circumstance, they are the architects of it.
I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought to chew on. There is a deeply provocative quote hidden in the margins of our source material today from the 20th century philosopher Walter Benjamin, and I saved it exclusively for this moment. He wrote, "He who asks fortune tellers the future unwittingly forfeits an inner intimation of coming events that is 1,000 times more exact than anything they may say."
It is a striking, deeply convicting concept. We are so incredibly eager to have someone else alleviate our anxiety by telling us how things will turn out.
And I want you to really ponder this as you go about your week. In our modern lives, we might not visit literal fortune tellers with crystal balls or tarot cards, but we absolutely have our own modern versions.
The experts and the algorithms.
Exactly. We obsessively seek external validation for our ideas. We look for quick life hacks on the internet to bypass the hard work of strategy. We rely on pundits, highly paid consultants, or trending algorithms to predict our path for us. By constantly outsourcing our vision to these modern fortune tellers, are we silencing our own innate, powerful ability to critically analyze the end? Are we ignoring our own inner intimation, our own rational foresight, simply because it's easier and less scary to be swept along by the crowd?
It is a question that demands rigorous introspection. True power, the kind that survives the jungle and outlasts the empire, comes from trusting and developing your own carefully cultivated foresight.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. As you go forward this week, take a moment to look closely at that bridge you are building in your life. Don't just admire the architecture of the on-ramp, look across the gorge, see the other side clearly, and always, always plan to the end.